Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to tune in. Today I had some time. I was supposed to go to the country for Christmas early, but ended up having some problems with things getting in the way. So I am here still in the city. And I wanted to do a little bit of a podcast and I wanted to come on. I'm going to do some more film reviews later in 2023, so I have the time, have a moment, and thought, why not? Let's talk about a film, one of my favorite films. At one stage, I pursued acting, and now I'm pursuing making kids' books, and eventually wanting to go on and make a short animated film in stop motion. So it's crazy, the journey, but life is a journey. And this film, on the subject of journeys, is really a journey like really no other. It is a film that I'm very passionate about, and it's a film that I feel is very culturally important. I think that film really explores, it is a language that explores the narrative of society and the world. I think art is a reflection of society, in whatever capacity it might be, whether it is visual art or making film or music. Back in the day, music tended to be a lot more soulful and a lot more lyric based. These days, songs tend to be very based on sex and ass and if you grew up at the end of the 80s coming into the 90s and then got into the early 2000s, then you probably understand understand where I'm coming from with that. I remember this film so vividly when it came out because I was going through an experience that was very similar to the main protagonist in the film, and I really enjoyed it. And it stayed with me for many years. I remember buying it on DVD back in the day when we had DVD shops and, hiring them and stuff like Video Hut and things like that. And, I've always got a bit of a DVD or even for those of you guys who remember a VHS. I have lots of things in my collection there, lots of DVD shelves, and I think film is an art form which is also beginning to die. I think in time film will end up in AI as well. So let's get on with this movie. I'm going to share my thoughts on it, and this is a bit of a deep dive, so I don't know how long it's going to go for. It'll go for as long as it goes. I have some notes which I've quickly written down, but a lot of it just comes from memory. And first of all, if you haven't seen this film, please go and see the film. If you can get it, it is streaming for free on Disney Plus. It is also on Amazon Prime, I believe. Or you might be able to pick it up at like a bargain bin or Walmart, Kmart, Big W, wherever you can. Probably no more than a few dollars these days, as DVD prices have dropped right down. Or you could just download it, pay for it here on YouTube. So go and watch the film because this is going to be with spoilers, this little podcast today. So without further ado, the film is called 13. It came out in the early 2000s, in 2003. I think it kind of came right off the bat of a lot of changes that were happening around that time. The emergence of technological society and the changes that were starting to happen. It was before Facebook or Instagram. This film is centered around back in the time when kids or teenagers really had to form their own personalities and navigate a world that didn't have any of the fuckery that we have now. And so I always think about like the landscape that this film was filmed in, and now I often think to myself, and I wonder what a film like this would look like if it was done in today's society, 23 years or 20 years later, because it's just changed so much with social media now. And of course, social media really affects how we communicate, how we see each other, how we interact with each other, how we see the world. And there is a show at the moment which is very reminiscent of this in the modern world. And it's very beautiful. It's shot very well. If you may know it, it's called Euphoria with Zendaya. And it really focuses on a journey of a teenage girl and her angst and her drug problems and life problems and the fast-paced, neurotic energy of like a teenager's landscape, trying to come to terms with society and everything. So for this film, it was done on a very short, very, very small budget. I believe Catherine had a really hard time trying to put this together, and it was all done really just on a shoestring budget of 1 million. So that's not very much to make a film if you know how much it costs to make a film. And a lot of improvisation and a lot of hard work has gone into this. It is more of a doco style film. So it's all shot on a 16 millimeter film, and it's very much like an indie style. So it's very in your face. The camera is shaky, and that really lends itself beautifully to the storytelling of the main character Tracy and her journey with her mother. The supporting character's name is Evie Zamora in the movie, and in her real life it's played by Nikki Reed. And it was actually Nikki Reed and Catherine Hardwick were the ones that actually wrote the screenplay and wrote the story for 13. Catherine Hardwick knew her mum as back in the day, and they had a relationship. They were friends and kind of family friends, and it all kind of started from this kind of shaking of the hand where not Tracy, where Catherine said to Nikki Reed, "Hey, I want to make a film." Nikki said, "I want to be an actor. I'm serious about acting." And they just went off, and it's like this explosion of energy happened. So I often put this film in the same category as Leonardo DiCaprio's high school basketball diaries, or put it in the same category as Requiem for a Dream by Darren Aronofsky, another incredible film. Black Swan, these types of hard-hitting sledgehammer films, they come around very, very rarely. And for me, I find them... I have a relationship with truth that I'm always exploring because I have double Sag in my chart. So things like this film to me are spectacular. This film is a masterpiece of cinema, of storytelling, because it isn't some like fabricated, fluffy, teen angsty. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with teen angst. This film is gritty and raw and isn't afraid to show us the real thing. And I love the ending, which I'll get to later in this podcast. But there is a building of energy that has to happen in the film for it to get to its like climactic showdown, its finish. And it also shows that in life, as I've often learned, putting in some of my own life experience into this as well, is that we don't really tend to get the closure that we need to move forward from other people. Sometimes relationships end and we never know why. We don't have that, sit them down and be like, "Hey, what did that mean for you? This is what it meant for me." And we can work out a resolution so we can move forward to stop the conflict in our head of not ever knowing. And that's not how life works. We don't get to know everything. We don't get resolution. And we just have to keep moving forward and understand that life is a series of events that happen and there is no end point. Everything's always moving and shifting into a new point, which this film does. There's no light and happy, fluffy, like all better, magical kind of Marvel nonsense. This is brutal. So the film is around 13-year-old Tracy. She's a seventh grader and she's really trying to find herself in the midst of her parents' divorce. And Tracy is really kind of considered a very well-spoken, well-mannered, very shy character. She wants to get good grades and wants to be perfect. She's got this kind of nice relationship with her mum. She's into writing poetry. And it shows us that she has a very nice range of access to her own emotions. She's able to express herself beautifully and very soft and gentle and kind of crossing over now the threshold of, that period of time where you go from being a kid to being an adult, and all of a sudden it's not cool to wear those clothes, it's not cool to have those posters on your wall, or it's not cool to wear certain things or look a certain way. It's kind of like you're forming your own sense of identity. And everything that we see Tracy at the start of the film is a reflection of what becomes of her in the end of the film. So it's like we get this foreshadowing at the start of the film where we see Tracy on the bed. The first scene of the film really pulls us in as an audience, and Tracy and Evie. So Evie is the supporting character in the film, and Evie is this sexy, cool girl that is very confident. All the boys like her. She's got the cool clothes. She's gorgeous, and she's kind of edgy, and she knows how to articulate herself, express herself. She's very kind of sexualizes herself in a way that is kind of playing with power. And that's what this film is, in a way, is that period of time where we go from that crossover from not having any power to now being able to move into adulthood, and most people would look at that and go, well, that wouldn't really happen, or that really shouldn't happen until you get to like 17, 18, 19. But in reality, we know that kids are having sex now at the age of 11 and 12. We know statistically that kids come into, adulthood very, very, very fast. And with the access to the internet at the click of their phone, everyone's kind of accessible on such a level that it's just unrealistic to think that it's not, that things aren't moving this quick. Everything's moving so quickly. And so, at the start of the film, we see Tracy on the bed and she is chroming, which is huffing. They, call it huffing. It is, so the Tracy and Evie have got they're spraying into like a bag or a sock, and they're sniffing it like an inhalant and basically getting high. And it's this mad, neurotic, like, hit me. And she's like, oh, hit me harder, hit me. She's like, hits me. And then, so it's just kind of like showing us where the fuck is all of this going? How did we get to this? So at the start of the film, it just really pulls us in and introduces us to this characterization of what is to come. And I mean, back in the day, in our parents' day or their parents before them, this level of behavior would just be considered spoiled and entitled and ridiculous and self-indulgent. But that's the cultural shift that's happened. There was a lot of cultural shift, I believe, happened in the world, particularly in America, after the World Trade Center event and the war in Iraq started and things shifted around. And, teenagers, of course, it's just such a, going to high school, it's like a battlefield. Your locker, your makeup could be a symbol of war paint, or, any type of, like, everything's so primal. It's your first love, it's your first crush, it's your first heartbreak. You're getting dumped at lunchtime and recess and hiding in the toilets and bitching and bullying and backstabbing and all of the fuckery that goes on with growing up and being a teenager, which is something that I would never, ever want to do. So yeah, we see this, then we jump into the film at the start, and then the film rewinds and we go back and we see the start of where all of this kind of began, and the struggles and the problems that start to form in Tracy. She is a self-harmer. This film does have cutting in it. She's a cutter. She has an eating problem. And, all of the shadows of coming from a family that is broken. We know that when someone doesn't have a safe, stable family base, that they feel, that we know that that's higher levels of depression, fragmentation happens. And Tracy writes a poem to her mum, and her mum, played by Holly Hunter, it played so well, such an incredible performance as Melanie. Is this kind of character that has a really big heart, and she is a really good mum. She's just trying to do her fucking best. She cuts hair, so that's how she supports herself, and she has clients that come to her house to get their hair cut. And her husband and her have divorced, and she's got the kids, custody of the kids, and she is just trying to do the best she can to financially support the family that she has. And she can't say no to anyone. Tracy's mum has this problem where she just can't put up a boundary around herself to protect herself and her family. So she's also a former alcoholic or drug addict. So she's been an addict on whatever capacity. And she kind of invites people from her past back into the house, which also changes the dynamic of the house. Although Melanie is recovering from her addictions, she still is not at a stage where she's strong enough to recognize that these patterns of people that she keeps around her are not good for her. And so that plays a part in Tracy's resentment and anger and distrust of her mother, which begins to build. This film isn't just about the struggle of teenage pain. It is also a really beautiful film that explores the relationship between a mother and her daughter, and the level of love that a mother has for her child, even when her child is hurting everyone around her, including herself, like her mother. So yeah, it's such a heavy film. It's such a beautiful film. And so it all starts off, Tracy writes a poem to her mother, and her mother really doesn't understand the gravity of the poem. It's a really well-written kind of commentary that Tracy's written about the shifts that are kind of happening within her. But her mum doesn't really understand or have time at that point to understand what the poem really is reflecting and what's happening within Tracy. So it's all kind of like, it's moving so quick. And I think that that's one of the things that this looks at as well, is that things can change with people very quickly, particularly if they are around the wrong person and we're not acknowledging the pain that's inside. We start to turn to vices, and if we're not getting attention, if we're not getting love, we can act out to create dynamics which enable us to get love, kind of by proxy. And so there's this kind of distinct, memorable scene sequence at the start of the movie that shows the communication that Tracy has with her mum. Tracy goes to school and spots Evie, the cool girl. And that's what this really is about. It's about Tracy emulating or wanting to see or be Evie Zamora. Evie is everything that Tracy wishes that she could be. And Tracy is tired of being like a baby. She wants to get new clothes. She wants to be someone else. She's kind of emerging into her personality. And it's a really heavy, it's such a heavy film, but it's so well done. I can't say that enough about this film. Anyway, Tracy will do anything she can to try and win over Evie's attention, even when Evie ignores her. So the way that this is shot is beautifully done. Tracy ends up going out and stealing, and Evie and her both kind of team up. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and everything kind of just begins to spiral out of control. It's kind of a little bit like throwing lighter fluid on a flame, and these characters are already charged enough. And then when they come together in the movie, Evie and Tracy become very close. Evie's background is that she doesn't really have a family. She doesn't have a solid support network at all. So she's kind of living this adult lifestyle and playing with very adult things. Like she's having sex, she's doing drugs, she's partying, very irresponsible. No one's kind of asserting any type of family authority over her. She lives with her cousin, and it's showing the backgrounds of the characters and why they behave the way that they do. And I think we've all gone to school and we've seen people that are like this. I certainly have. And I think this film speaks to me so deeply because I had this very controlled environment that I grew up in as up till like 15, 16, 17, where I was a swimmer, and my whole life was very much like about being on the swimming pool deck, swimming, training, doing what I was told, following the training, following the orders. I never really developed a personality for me personally until I got to 17, 18. And then all of a sudden there was such a shift in me where I had to come to terms with who I am. And everything started spinning, like everything started moving very, very quickly. And right up into my early 20s, I was on a spinning wheel. And this film shows just how quickly things can happen. And I went from one person to another, and that's very much similar to Tracy's character arc. It's like there is a scene at the end of the film where Tracy is on a merry-go-round, like a dizzy whizzer, one of those things at a park that you spin around, and it's all moving so quickly and it's all overwhelming, and you can't kind of keep up, you can't follow it. And that is really how I felt, and why I feel that this film unpacks that feeling of not knowing what's going to happen next. Everything's moving, everything's neurotic. I mean, if you've been around a teenage girl, if you've ever raised a teenage girl, it's like a Gemini on speed, It's 1 minute they're happy and everything's good, and then their mobile will ring or the phone will ring, and then someone will answer it, and then it'll be their boyfriend, and she'll have a fight with them, and everything explodes, and it's all so dramatic, and then they're yelling and screaming and crying, and then once hormones are coming in, and then all of a sudden now everything's good again. It's just a roller coaster. Another film that I thought really explained that as well was The Bling Ring. A lot of the behavior in that film was also very neurotic, very crazy. It's very unstable, because it's a person that's coming into who they are, finding their own stability within themselves, or trying to, and then experimenting. So teenage years are very experimental. Early 20s are very experimental years, and touching the fire and getting burned, having bad relationships, learning heartbreak, that type of thing. It's all very relevant to the emphasizing on what I'm trying to say in this film. So basically the chemistry between the two characters is electric. I think I would even say it was probably Tracy's first love was Evie. And so as the film unravels, they kind of team up and they start to really get into the exploration of a really dark world. It's all kind of like lying, cheating, stealing, jacking money, selling drugs, pretty much everything that you'd want your teenage kid not to ever do. Lying to your mum about where you are, just being irresponsible, falling behind in your grades, letting go of old friends that have outgrown very quickly. Just everything changes so quick, and it's all about having fun. And the score for this film is beautiful as well. It's done so well. There's a great scene where they're all under the sprinkler, and it's like late at night, and they're high, and they've got these vests on, and they're just spinning around and enjoying the music of like the energy of life. It's and I remember times like that as well, when I was on the dance floor and I was young, and it was the first time that I could go out and drink alcohol or dance or have a good time, and it was just an explosion of energy that was just so much fun. And that's what the energy that I get between these characters, Evie and Tracy, is very much the same. But of course, it all takes a turn, and things begin to break down and get worse and worse in the film as it progresses. And I'd say that Tracy is such a dynamic character, because we really get to see the complexities of like the internal dialogue of her character. And I think that we see the film through the eyes of her and her perspective, which we don't really see that very often in teenage films. We kind of see teenagers as depicted as, like a bit of a joke, or a little bit like, can't wait to get my period, can't wait to be sexually active, or can't wait to get high, or just really stupid. But these kids are cunning, they're calculative, they're careful not to get caught, they're aware of society on a level where they're able to lie, manipulate, and play on the fact that I'm just a little girl, I don't know what I'm doing, kind of thing. Which brings me to a conversation point that I want to make. In my early 20s, when I was going out to raves, whether it was on like a field somewhere out in the bush, or I'm in Australia. When I say bush, I mean like out, like playing music out in a paddock, and we all slept in a swag, which is like a sleeping bag or a camping bag. And it was that I went to this, I guess you could call it was like a dance party. And what I saw was a lot of very, very young girls that were probably just turned 18, probably, 18, 19 years old, very young looking. And they love to sexualize themselves, like they're very, very short skirts, very light, soft pink colors, like Hello Kitty type of vibe. And that kind of emaciated, very pale skin, very skinny, and kind of alluring from the innocence that they're projecting and the sexualization of themselves to the male gaze in a very childish way that's kind of playing on their youth. But I noticed that when men came up to initiate conversation, they'd like, they like freak out, which is, dipping their toe in the water, but not really understanding the danger that they're actually playing with. Not that I'm advocating rape, but what I'm saying is, this is something that's coming up in porn a lot, is that whole baby doll thing, the coked up baby doll. It's shameless exploitation of a younger person, which we see a lot in all different types of cultures, particularly gay culture as well, with like older men and younger people, younger guys, daddy issues, or even, disgusting daddy issues where women don't have a strong father in their life and they want to, date older men to kind of replicate that relationship. It's all destructive. But anyway, I regress. I just wanted to make that point, that these characters, they do that in this film, and they know that, what they're playing with to a certain capacity. There is a sexual scene in this film where the two girls kind of try to hook up with an older neighbor character, and it just backfires really quickly because he realizes this is like jailbait. Very uncomfortable to watch, but that's part of it. It is part of the story. And So if things build up, the story goes where it goes. I feel like you just need to go and watch the film. It's such a good one. I hope you're enjoying this podcast. And so, of course, it all goes to hell, and we see it just getting worse and worse. The cutting gets worse and worse. And when Melanie can't adopt Evie into the house, Evie kind of turns on everyone and kind of pins all of the drug habits and the hiding spots, in Tracy's bedroom against Tracy. And then there's a showdown, and it's probably one of the greatest acting scenes probably I've seen ever, where there's this confrontational scene, and then Tracy and her mum both fall on the kitchen floor crying together, and everything kind of comes out, and Tracy is held by her mum, and the film comes to its conclusion on such a beautiful scale. Like I mentioned, it's very, very real, and it has to get to this kind of breaking point where everything begins to collapse in on itself. And that's kind of what it is. And then there's a realization that this behavior can't continue, and there has to be some level of reconnection again, and in a healthy way, where it's not I guess every character in this film learns about life and about who they are in the film. I think that's one of the greatest parts of the film, is that it's a journey of discovery, and that's what I wanted to bring up a lot in this. So 13, great, raw, brutal, hard-hitting, sad in a lot of ways film. So if you have the time and you've got the energy, if you've got a minute over Christmas period, perhaps you would like to check this film out. I've also found it very interesting to listen to the director's commentary. Sometimes I like to do that. Or I will even just come here on YouTube and I will listen to interviews with Evan Rachel Wood talking about the film. Recently, last year or the year before, they did a bit of they came back together for a reunion, and they had a conversation with the director, and they talked about their feelings on the film, where it went, how they felt about it, reflecting on it 20 years later. And then also, of course, just the interviews with Catherine Hardwick, and showing us her journey as a female filmmaker. There is not a lot of women out there that make films, and trying to get this film made was a nightmare. And surprisingly, trying to get a film like this made again was even worse, because studios don't really want to invest money into films about, R-rated films with swearing and teenage girls running around doing this. They're more interested in like the bigger films that pull in a bigger budget and get a stronger return, which tend to be more, like zipping around in tights and flying and being a superhero kind of thing. So, yeah, it's 13. Check it out. I'm going to leave it here today, but I hope you've enjoyed my review, my thoughts on this film. If you've got a teenage kid or you're a parent going through this, then I would highly, highly recommend watching this film. A lot of parents got very upset when this film came out, which I find absolutely ridiculous. I feel like this is a film that should be pretty much watched at school. I feel like this should be totally accessible. And if I had kids, I would let my kids watch this film, because it's so very truthful, and life is truthful. If you're truthful, like, what I'm saying is this film is art, and art is painful, and truth is painful. And when we see the revelations of how truthful these characters are with themselves, with each other, we learn something about ourselves through these characters. Like, we're all bits of each other, reflecting back and emulating each other and mirroring, and that's kind of what life is, I guess, in a way. So yeah, please go watch the film. Cannot speak highly enough of it. I will come back and do some more movie reviews. I'd love to read some comments below. Let me know what your thoughts are on 13. Have you seen it? What did you live this life? I've even seen people in some comments have written that this was really their life. They went through this experience with a friend, or they know someone who went through this. And I'd love to, if you're vulnerable enough and you're comfortable enough to share your thoughts on your own life in relation to this, dealing with addictions, dealing with the collapse of a family unit, or a really destructive friendship that you've had with someone who's been very manipulative, that might be even considered a lost cause, then I'd love to know. I'd love to know, because it helps me out. And if you enjoyed this movie review, please leave a comment below. Please like, share it, and please subscribe to my channel. It helps me grow. If you've got a topic you'd like me to talk about, then yeah, let me know what you think. I'm happy to talk about other films. I do want to talk about a film called The Counselor, and I would like to do a bit of a movie review on the film Mother by Darren Aronofsky. I recently rewatched Black Swan the other day, which was a really great one as well. So, all right, lots of love. I'm going to get out of here, and please have a happy, safe Christmas. Happy Christmas and a Merry always. Bye.